Hi, Mandy. Thank you so much for joining me for this interview today. I'm so excited to get the opportunity to speak with you about this.
Yes, same.
So to start, do you mind just kind of sharing your career journey and how you got to your current position?
Yeah, so it's kind of not a straight path, but most paths to your dream are not straight, right? So I got my degree from Texas A&M in elementary education with a a minor in reading. So I started off teaching third grade after graduation, and then moved up to fourth grade the next year, and then moved to Sci-Fair where I taught fifth grade. And I was there for 2 years, and then moved to Pearland and got a job in July before school started in August because I had gotten engaged and he had just bought a house in Pearland. And so was fortunate enough to land at Rogers Middle School in Pearland. So I always tell people, hang in. I got a job in July, right? Like, and so I was teaching sixth grade then. So I was at Rogers for 11 years, and the last 3 years there is where my path kind of went off the normal, education path. I had a great principal who she really just believed in growing leaders. And in our evaluation that year, she had asked me, what's next for you? Like, what do you see? And I had started to just feel I don't know if it was I loved what I was doing, but I was definitely feeling like I was tired of talking about main idea and context clues, because I knew there were deeper things that I just wanted to sit and talk to them about and dig into them about, right? About life. And so I said, I don't know. I would love to be able to just teach something that was like life, character, like failure's part of it, right? And so with her help, she said, well, let's make it happen. And so our school district at the time, we had a school board member who the word grit was kind of coming down the pipeline. You were seeing it a lot come up, it was kind of the buzzword at the time. And so he had presented an article, I think USA Today or something did an article about grit in education and some of Angela Duckworth's work. And so, but nothing had really been done with it specifically in the district. So my principal, Mrs. Miles, she said, well, let's just pull you out of the reading classroom. We'll run your class like an elective, so the kids will rotate through you one day a week, and we'll call it True Grit because they've been talking grit a lot. And then she trusted me completely, and I just kind of created this curriculum of sorts, of how to do life. So I got to teach every fifth and sixth grader on the campus one day a week, this class called True Grit. And we did service projects, and it was really great. And after a year, the district came to me and said, that grit thing, how can we put something together to impact the entire district? And so I was sitting in her office, the curriculum and instruction, I don't even know her official title. She was much bigger up than me, right? And so we were sitting in there, and she said, how do you feel about that? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. And I got in my car and I was like, thank you, Jesus, and help me, Jesus. Like, who am I? Like, who am I to create something everyone's gonna, because it was never in my plan, but I believed in it. And so just worked that summer to piece together a curriculum of sorts, although I never saw it as a curriculum to be taught. It was more of a culture shift. So how can we change language? How can we do all that? So coming out of that, I was able to continue teaching grit at Rogers, but at the same time, I was overseeing grit happening on the different campuses, just being infused into the culture and helping to support whatever that looked like. So that was the grit initiative. And then in 2015, the spring of 2015, we had 3 suicides in a 5-month period. And as with most big things in life, that's what makes people go, like time out, like we're doing a lot of things right, but something's wrong. And part of their conversation as the admin came together, the cabinet came together and started talking about solutions and things they could put into place. One of the things that came out of that conversation was the desire for an across the district uniform mentoring program, like something that kids could enter at kindergarten if they wanted to, and it was available to them all the way through high school. So in those talks, I think I wasn't in those talks, but I think that because I had already done this grid initiative, which was across the district. So I'd already created a district-wide initiative, and I had relationships built with principals and all the schools. I think that my name was put into the, that conversation. So they reached out and asked if I would be interested in coming off of the campus and creating the mentoring program and overseeing it. So we're in year 9 of that, as you well know. So that's how I landed where I was, never on the periphery. That was never in my thought because it didn't even exist. So yeah, that's
I had
it.
no idea that Rise actually started that way. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. People ask all the time, is it a suicide prevention program? And I'll say, I sure hope so. Like, I hope we're preventing a lot of things, right? But yeah.
Hey, I know on our campus, it is, I think, especially for our kids, like the look in their eyes when they go in there and they see their mentor, it's the most valuable time of their week because they know that person, I mean, I can go home and talk to mom and dad, but that person right there, they want to invest this time and energy into me. And that, I know that means so much to these kids, and it means a lot to us too, but I think it means more to them than anything.
For sure. And at junior high, right? For them to have a spark in their eye about anything is exciting. Yes. So yeah.
Yes. So this was kind of answered already, but I guess I can rephrase the question. So what motivated you to pursue this career in communications? What really sparked that fire in your heart to start working with those kids in the GRIT initiative?
Yeah, I have always, from my very first year of teaching, relationships were the center of how I taught. Like I was never like super genius in any curriculum, right? I could learn, third grade math to teach it. I was never driven by the curriculum. I didn't love, all the things I taught. But I believed very much that if I could build a connection with the students and their parents. So I became very, very connected. And I always knew I could get them to do anything I asked because we had created that. So I had seen it over the course of my career be the thing that made me successful. So when it came to the GRIT initiative, first, and then the mentoring program, it was all about just kind of seeing beyond, the things we teach textbook wise, and just knowing that, we have an opportunity in education, especially, to be just so impactful, right? Beyond, I never, even with my own son, like my goal has never been, he's a senior this year. My goal with him is not that he is a really good senior in high school, because that's fleeting, right? Like, what am I doing to create, a healthy man that can move into the world? And I really saw that I see that with every kid, whether it's a kid I'm matching with a mentor or, I'm not just looking to, let's get them through third grade. Like, what are we instilling in them that's going to go beyond, right? And the GRIT initiative was all about that, right? Like, how do we do life? Like watching people be resilient, and then looking at how we can be that in our life. How do we emulate that? That was the curriculum. I would find people, kids that look like them, talk like them, walk like them, that were bouncing back and doing big things. And then we would talk about, well, what does that look like for us? And then when it comes to mentoring, same idea, because connections are everything. Loneliness is terrible. And so, so that just kind of became my driving. That's always been behind everything. And I can look back now and see how that's always been the foundation of it all. And I've just been given great opportunities to build on that. So, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that I'm learning more about like the background of Rise as well now. I know I'm not a part of it anymore, unfortunately, but
you definitely are. Don't say
the work that I did with it was very, like, it just made my heart so happy to see the importance of that relationship, not only for the kid, but for the adult too. Like, I think it means so much to them too.
Absolutely. Yes.
So in your current role, what are some common challenges that you face now or you have faced, and how do you navigate those challenges?
Yeah, so definitely the challenges for me are there's just so many people, right? And
Yeah.
I'm such a people pleaser. I am so relational. Like I am somebody that wants to be so proximate to the people that I serve. Like I want to be I want to go have lunch with every mentor. I want to know who they are. I want to know the kids. And so I've learned as I've kind of moved up, like whatever up means, right? And for
Yeah.
me, moving up means I have more people underneath me that look to me for guidance, right? So in the classroom, I had my students and their parents. And then with the grid initiative, I had my students, and now I had 23 campuses that were looking at me for that. And now with this, I have the district, and then I have community members, and I have parents. So I think the biggest challenge for me is just having to learn how to lead from a different position, right? Like almost like further away from, but still trying to make it feel small, that mentors feel seen and heard and valued. The other hard thing is when a conflict does arise, if there's a parent who's upset with something with the mentoring program. Fortunately, we haven't had a ton, but when it has happened, it's difficult for me because before, when I was teaching in the classroom, I would have already had a relationship with that parent. So when a conflict arose, they knew my heart and could trust me. They don't know me, right? And so when I do have to deal with a conflict, whether it's with a teacher with Rise or with a parent or a student or whatever, I have to find a way for them to hear me, right? Because before they would hear me because I had proven to be trustworthy through our relationship, right? So I guess, and for me, it's also just organizing it all. I'm not naturally super organized, so trying to keep up with everything. I've always been somebody that I'll look at my calendar tonight to see what I have to do tomorrow. But now I realize leading a bunch of people, not everybody works the same way I do. So I've had to start to really understand that I might not need that information 4 months out, but somebody needs that information 4 months ahead of time. So I've had to really not just think about how I operate and move, but also understand I've got to communicate in a way that is heard and lands to hundreds of people that think differently, right? So I think all
Because
those
you've
are
got a
probably
lot of people working under you.
I got a lot of people that are like, what do we do? When do we do it? Right. Which is an honor. Right. And I want them all to feel valued. And so sometimes that's hard when there are so many and they're not proximate to me. Right. So, yeah.
So has there been a specific project or situation where the communication skills that you have played a pivotal role in overcoming that situation?
Yeah, so there's been a couple times. Like I said, I haven't had a ton of conflict, with somebody having an issue with Rise. There's certainly been things here and there, as there will be when you're dealing with humans, right?
Yeah.
And so that should be understood. One in particular I can think of was it was something that it was actually the grandparent of one of our kids that had a mentor, and she was the guardian, so there was some stuff in the family, right, already, and I didn't know everything. I received a call from her. I didn't know her, and so I got the call. I don't normally get a call directly from a parent or someone of that sort. And when we got on the phone, she just started off and she was angry and she was upset. I don't even 100% remember exactly what the issue was. I just remember the process. And so she came in hot, right? And I just listened. And I affirmed that I could completely understand why she was upset in that. And through the course of the conversation, you could start to see her kind of slow down and back up, and you could see the anger start to subside, because I wasn't countering her anger. I was validating, right? Like, I hear you, right? Like you didn't, and I wish I could even remember the exact what the whole issue was, but it was so beautiful because by the end of it, she was telling me her whole story. She was telling me a week later, something happened and she reached out to me. She said, I don't trust anybody at that school or this district, but I trust you. So I'm going to come. She started off hot yelling at me.
Yeah.
Right. And so it really was a beautiful lesson in, just a lot of times she just needed a place to vent. It had nothing to do with me. I couldn't take it personal, which I generally would do.
Yeah.
But I kept saying, she doesn't know me. She's scared. She's the protector of her grandkid, and she thinks that's being violent, all the things. And so, but yeah, after about a 30-minute conversation, and to this day, she is connected with me. She'll message me. She'll ask me, can you pray for my granddaughter? Can you do this? Like, I don't know. And it was just that one conversation that started off terrible. And now she just sees me as one of the people that she trusts, right? That she'll not dump things on, but she'll call and share those things, right? So yeah, a huge lesson in communication, right? A huge lesson in just stopping sometimes and, yeah. So that was that was one I could see where the communication skill set worked out, right?
Yeah.
It worked out. So
so I know you have your own LLC. Can you talk more about it and kind of, I'm assuming it's kind of connected to where your heart is, with wanting to pour into these kiddos. So can you just kind of elaborate a little bit more on what your LLC does?
Yeah. So Rooted Together it's actually, so when Hurricane Harvey hit, right, the area, in whatever year that was, 2017, I think, there was, I started at that point, Rise, we were 2 years into Rise, right? 2015, or almost 3, and starting our 3rd year. So I had already built connections with a community of people, right? I knew plumbers now, and I knew lawyers, and I knew like people that had become mentors. And so when Hurricane Harvey hit, our house was not affected. So we were one of the ones that could help other people. And so what I started recognizing was people would put out a need, or somebody needed something, and we, like everybody else, wanted to go help, right? Go help people out. Well, I started to realize that people would ask for something, and I didn't have most of the things they needed, but I knew someone that did. So I became like the great connector. Like, it kind of became a joke that people were like, oh, you need a mattress? Mandy, do you have a mattress? And one kid needed a trumpet, and I'm like, well, it's worth a shot. So I put it out, and in 5 minutes we had a trumpet. And so it just kind of became this, like, I started realizing how critical those connections I had were, because in that moment of need, I couldn't help, but I could I could share my community, right? So that people in that space weren't going through the adversity alone. So I started recognizing, again, going back to that heart of relationships and connection and not wanting anybody to feel alone. And in that, that's where Rooted Together is the name of the LLC. And the name came from a video, not a video, a video that I found after Hurricane Katrina, actually. I was in 2018 searching for a video for some other presentation I was going to do, and somehow I stumbled upon this video, and it was some scientists talking about an area on St. Charles Street in New Orleans that prior to Hurricane Katrina, there were over 700 live oak trees that lined the streets. And the scientists were baffled because after the hurricane in that area, all but 4 of those trees survived. And they were so confused. They wanted to know why. How did those trees survive when nothing else did? And one of their conclusions was they survived because they were rooted together. And so when I heard that, I was like, yes, that's it. And that's how that's why I named it Rooted Together, because my whole idea is to really create communities for people, relationships, connections, right? Where not if adversity hits, but when adversity hits, it's not just hitting one, it's hitting an entire community, right? So whatever that looks like. It actually also just started off because I was being invited to go speak. It started off with just about grit, because people were like, come talk about that to our group, and started recognizing I'm sharing grit with the leadership at Memorial Hermann. I was speaking
Mhm.
grit to people that were not education, because it's not just an education thing, it's a
Mhm.
life thing. So
Yeah.
I started getting all these invitations to go speak. And so I needed a platform that wasn't education, that was separate, because when
Yeah.
I do that, it is separate from Rise, it's separate from
Mhm.
Pearland ISD. So I created it really just as a platform, but with the understanding that I wanted that LLC, its main mission is to create
Mhm.
communities for people, right? To be connected, to feel seen, and to have, yeah, resources. And so, but it stemmed from Hurricane Harvey. So Rise stemmed from suicides, Rooted Together stemmed from hurricane. So lesson there, oftentimes the greatest things in our life come from some of the hardest, right?
Yes.
Yeah, both of
So
them
true.
were born out of just terrible things, but that's where fruit is grown. So in the
It is.
valley.
It
So
is. It is.
yeah.
So how do you continue to invest in your professional development and stay relevant in the ever-changing field of communications and really just
Yeah.
working with others?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I am a consummate consumer of learning. I listen to podcasts all the time in the morning getting ready. I don't read as much as I should. I more watch the video of the author
Mhm.
talking about the book, right? And then I'll read passages of it or listen to people do a TED talk on it. So
Mhm.
um, I'm connected to a lot of people, and I just want to
Mhm.
learn from them. So I'll just sit in spaces with them. I love conferences. I love workshops. I love webinars.
Mhm.
I always know there's more. I always
Yeah.
know that I've never fully arrived, right? That I'm not an
Mhm.
expert in anything.
Mhm.
I think that but I can find someone who is. I can find
Mhm.
information, and so I feel like I'm always listening for something. And I see it's hard for me to really do anything without finding a message or a lesson in it. I'm like, Mandy,
Mhm.
just walk your dogs. And then the next thing I know, I'm like starting a little. I was like, this could be my second book, a little thing about lessons on a dog walk. And I started like, I'm like
Yeah.
all these things. And so it's almost like in everything I see like an analogy or something that I'm like, that's a
Mhm.
great metaphor for blah
Yeah.
blah blah. So
Yeah.
I would say
Yes.
professional development is one of my most favorite things.
Yeah.
I just anything leadership or young people or life, like
Mhm.
I love learning all of that. So it's not hard for me to do that because I enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I'm thankful for people like that because that is very much not my thing all the time. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you like to go and seek out that wisdom and then come back and share it with the rest of us.
Yes, yes. I catch myself a lot when I'm speaking. I'll be like, so this is not my story. I heard it, right? But
Mhm.
it's one of those things that I've learned two ways you do not impact people. You will never impact people if you're completely empty and you're trying to fill other people up. Can't do
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And also, if you hear something or learn something that really makes you go, yes, right? Or really
Mhm.
hits you and you
Yeah.
don't share it, it
Yeah.
doesn't do any good for anybody else. So I am all in my talks. A lot of time I'm like, do you have any original content? Because I literally, but I think one of my gifts from being a teacher for all those years is being able to take complex ideas and break
Mhm.
it down into bite-sized pieces that people
Yeah.
can go, oh, that's what
Yeah.
that is, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. So how important do you consider networking in the communication field? And do you have any tips for effective networking?
Yeah, I think it's everything, right? Like I
Mhm.
think that again it goes back to connections.
Mhm.
There's always someone that has encountered whatever you're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Or there's always somebody coming up that's going to need
Mhm. Mhm.
you to be that
Yeah.
for them, right?
Yeah.
So I think finding people like doing what you're doing, even
Mhm.
through this class and finding people in professions that you're looking to or that have gone a road that you're interested in, the best way to do it is to learn from those around you. And I think the second part of that, the best advice on networking is just stay super curious. That's my
Mhm.
favorite word to give people is if we would just walk through life every day and just stay completely open and completely curious to every situation and every person, right? I think we miss a lot because we're defensive, or we, somebody does something, and instead of being I can't believe they X, Y, or Z, curious goes, I wonder why they, right? And so that just allows you space to move in more. So I think just being really open, really curious, and not being afraid to move in and ask the question. Because for the most part, people want to help. People like to share their story. This is such a gift for me because I've lived this, but I don't often stop and realize how I got to where I am until somebody allows me a space to talk about it, right? So people want to do that. And so I think knowing that that's really what networking is. It's mentoring. It's passing on information. So I think the most successful people do it well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. They do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share an example of a successful collaboration or partnership that you've been involved with, working for the district or with your own thing with Rooted?
Yeah. So most definitely when I think it was around that same time, like 2018, I had gone to Washington, D.C. They have a national mentoring conference every year, right?
Yeah.
And so I had gone that year. The district had allowed me to go. And so I was up there, and I ran into, in this room full of thousands of people, I just happened to run into the girl who ran the mentoring program for Spring Branch, right? So her and I knew each other because we had collaborated a little bit before that. We were walking out of one of the last sessions, and I said to her, I was like, she asked what I thought about it, and I said, I think it was very good. I can always learn things, but I wish there had been more people here, or more workshops on school-based mentoring, because there was a lot of community, there was a lot of faith-based, or all the things, but there wasn't a whole lot that looked like the mentoring that her and I were doing. And so we said, kind of jokingly, I guess, where we were like, well, we're going to have to make our own. We'll just have to do our own conference or our own workshop. So fast forward, I don't really remember the exact timeline, but it was probably close to a year after that. I was at work one day. It was kind of late. It was 5 o'clock, and I got a call that came in, and I answered it. And it was somebody from Santa Fe. Santa Fe had the school shooting.
Yeah.
And so this was, months after that, or possibly a year. And it was a lady who had was working with one of the junior high counselors to get a grant from the Education Foundation to start a mentoring program. And they had found our mentoring program online. So they were reaching out to see if I, could talk with them about how we did all that. And so, of course, I said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. Well, then we hung up, and I was like, yeah, we need a group. Like we need a network, right? So I just got contacts through our communications department. They have all the they had all their communications people in all the districts. So we just sent a blast email and said, hey, if you have a school-based mentoring program, would you contact Mandy? So they started contacting me, and we now have we call it a school-based mentoring alliance. It's a group of probably, I don't know, there's probably 60 plus people there now. Districts all over Fort Worth. We have someone that comes in from New York to our virtual meetings, like people that have just found, or if anybody ever hears about a district that wants to start a mentoring program, they share about our alliance. So they'll reach out, and I'll include them on the email blast. So probably three times a year, we get together virtually and just share, like, how are y'all recruiting? What's working? How are you doing mentoring month? Like, just literally share ideas, and it is phenomenal. And then this last year, we did our own conference. So we had a conference. Not Katie, Conroe hosted it, and we brought in speakers, and we just put on our own conference for school-based mentoring people. And they were like, thank you. We didn't realize other people were doing this. And it was the first time many of us had actually met in person, because we'd done virtual. So I think that collaboration has been a game changer for so many people, right? So if you go to a lot of the districts, if you go to them, you're going to see things that look just like Rise, but it has their name on it, right? Or I've incorporated some of theirs. I go to their trainings, they come to ours and take notes. And so, yeah, that's been a powerful collaboration that I know has made all of our programs stronger for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
most definitely.
Yep.
So I know your path was a little bit wonky getting to where you are now. But is there anything that you wish you had known or done differently before you got to this place right now?
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny because you just go, right? You rarely stop and think, what would I have done differently? I think that I wish sooner on I would have that I would have given myself more credit. You know, I think that a lot of times I would stand in rooms or be in spaces where I felt like I didn't belong there. And I think I made myself small at times in places just because I didn't have the same title. I hadn't done all the things, because I would be invited to speak at crazy places, right? Where I'm like, how am I here, right? And I would catch myself oftentimes talking. If I was doing a presentation to a group, my standard opening was something like, well, I'm not a high paid consultant. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a doctorate. I started off by naming all the things I wasn't, right?
Yeah.
And then would move in. So I think that I think the biggest, and I don't know that it's a regret, but I do wish earlier on I would have trusted what I did know, right? And trusted that maybe I didn't have all the same education or whatever, but had passion, I had a heart, had a faith, I had things that had gotten me to where I was. And so basically I needed to take the advice I'd given so many other people, right? But then I would find myself kind of shrinking in rooms based on my comparison of, and I don't think I needed to do that, right? I think I needed to stand in who I was and what I did bring to the table. So yeah, I think that would have opened up some things for me, and maybe other people would have seen me differently earlier on, right? If I would have done that. So yeah.
Okay. So this last question, I kind of want to share a little bit about what I want to do after graduation. I kind of want to be you, but not quite you, because that intimidates me a lot. But I would love to get the opportunity to work as a community liaison for a school district, or even working with like a police department, partnering with like CPS and different affiliations that they can meet with. There's actually one that I'm very interested in. It's about you work with veterans that they're moving to your area, and getting them hooked up with counselors from the VA, and then helping their kids also, find a great school and get into a good counseling program in the area for them as well. So what's some advice that you have for me as I'm trying to kind of navigate that path as I get closer to graduation?
Oh, I love all of that. You will be so good at that. It's just it's meeting people where they are, and helping them navigate where they want to go, right? And so I think the best advice I can give anybody, because people will often ask, like, how do I get your job? How do I do what you do, right? And I have to remind them that what I do didn't even exist 9 years ago, right? Like, I didn't even know it was a choice. So I think the greatest advice I can give is always have an idea of where you want to go. And I love that you can articulate that. You're like, I don't know exactly which avenue, but I want to do this thing. I want to be the in-between in a community, right? In certain spaces. And I think having that in the periphery is good. But I also think I have learned in my journey, every step along the way, I just did really well where my feet were planted at the time. I asked a lot of good questions. I stayed open. I built a lot of bridges. I didn't tear down bridges. I never burned bridges. I worked hard to be present where I was in the work that I was doing. And then opportunities and doors opened because people saw in me, they saw my heart, and they wanted to give me an opportunity that I didn't even know was there to ask for, right? And so I really think just sometimes people get so laser focused on finding that one perfect kind of job that I wanted, right? And they're like, and anything that veers off of that, you know, I think about that was my brother, right? Before he passed, and he never could. He was bouncing from one thing to the next because he knew this is the one thing I want to do, and he wasn't willing to do all the other things along the way because that wasn't what he wanted to do. And so I really think that just where you're at, always keep the future in mind, that you know where you're moving, but don't neglect the present, right? Do where you're at really, really well. And then just continue to stay super curious, right? Throughout the whole thing. Stay curious, ask questions, connect with people, and you'll start to see doors pop up and open that you didn't even know were an option, right? And so I think that's happened to me multiple times along the path, right? Great leaders ahead of me that asked good questions, right? Like, what's next for you? And they were willing to help make that happen. So I'm confident it'll happen for you too. So yeah.
Well, I'm so excited that I got the opportunity to sit and talk with you about this, because I know, like, because we've worked together, not in super close proximity, but in close enough proximity. And I've grown to really admire the work that you do, not only with the school district, but your own thing. I think that's kind of what I drew my ideal job in a perfect world. I think that's where it came from. Just the connection. Like I kind of want to be the go-between, but I want to be the go-between for just the one thing.
No, I love it.
Intimidating to me.
Yeah. It is so fulfilling to be like, I started to realize I had just one thing that's with that. I never forget, because I was always the teacher right there. I would walk into a place and they'd be like, Miss Benedict's, like, oh, you know, like coming up, because I was directly affecting the kids in this case, right? And I'll never forget, Rise had been going like the first year, and we go to Casa Ole to eat, and the girl who was the hostess, she didn't know me from Adam, but I recognized her right away from Skyward, from her name tag. And I leaned over to my husband and I was like, she doesn't know me, but I gave her her mentor, and they have such a great connection. And they had so many like huge moments between the two of them. And she had no idea who I was. So she sat us at the table. I didn't get a Miss Benedict, but in my heart, I was like, I did something for her, right? And that's where I realized I had reached a different level of leadership maturity, where I didn't need the Miss Benedict.
The validation.
I was validated by knowing, even though she didn't know, right? That I had been that connector of sorts between her and something that I knew was powerful for her. So yeah, I think your desire to do that is, it's the most fulfilling thing ever, in whatever capacity it comes. And the beautiful thing about what you want to do is you don't have to wait for there to be a job. You can do that as a human all the time, right? But we need a paycheck too, so let's find a job.
It would be nice. Well, thank you again so much.
So fun.
I really appreciated this time. I can't express how grateful I am to get this little bit of time of yours.
So we'll talk again.
Yes. I'm gonna stop the recording. There we go.